In 1841, a Scottish farmer drove two different metals into his cabbage patch and watched his vegetables outgrow everything in the county. No manure, no irrigation, just copper and zinc buried in the dirt. He had accidentally built what scientists now call a galvanic cell, a battery made from the earth itself. The technology was so simple that anyone could replicate it with spare change. Then it vanished from agricultural textbooks, replaced by an industry that needed you to buy something new every season. Here is why two pieces of metal buried once could power your garden for decades, and why the companies selling fertilizer hoped you would never find out. The soil beneath your feet is not dead. It hums with electrical activity, ions moving through moisture, minerals exchanging charges, roots sending signals through networks of fungi. Every handful of earth is a weak electrolyte, a solution capable of conducting electricity if given the right push. For most of history, farmers worked this ground without knowing what flowed beneath their boots. But in the early 19th century, a few curious minds began to wonder if the spark of life in plants was more than a metaphor. Alexander Bain was not a farmer by trade. He was a Scottish clockmaker and inventor, best known for patenting the electric clock in 1841. But Bain understood something that most of his contemporaries missed. He saw that the earth itself could generate a steady current if you knew how to tap it. His experiments led to the earth battery, a simple device made by burying plates of copper and zinc in moist soil. The two metals, separated by the ground between them, created a voltage difference. Electrons flowed from the zinc to the copper, and a circuit was born. Bain used this principle to power telegraph lines across the British countryside. No wires strung to power stations. No coal burned to keep the signal alive. Just metal and mud, generating electricity from the chemistry of the soil. What Bain discovered was not magic. It was electrochemistry, the same science that powers every battery in your phone or car. When zinc is buried in soil, it oxidizes, releasing electrons. Copper, more stable and less reactive, accepts those electrons. The soil acts as the electrolyte, the conductive medium that allows ions to travel between the two metals. The result is a small but persistent voltage, typically between 0.5 and 1.1 volts per cell. That is not enough to light a bulb, but it is more than enough to influence the electrical environment around a plant's roots. The implications for agriculture were not lost on the experimenters of that era. If plants respond to electrical fields, and the earth can generate its own current, then perhaps a buried battery could stimulate growth without a single drop of chemical fertilizer. The idea was radical. It suggested that fertility was not just about nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. It was about energy, about the invisible currents that flow through every living system. By the late 1800s, scattered reports began to surface. Gardeners in England and France claimed that vegetables grown near buried metal pairs were larger, healthier, and more resistant to pests. A French agronomist named Grandot published observations of enhanced root development in plots treated with galvanic currents. In Germany, researchers at agricultural institutes measured increased yields in grain crops exposed to weak electrical fields. The evidence was fragmented, often dismissed as anecdotal, but it pointed toward a pattern that would not go away. Something was happening in the soil when two metals met. The science of why this works begins with the plant itself. Every root tip is a sensing organ, probing the soil for water, nutrients, and signals from neighboring organisms. But roots do more than absorb. They generate their own electrical potentials, tiny voltages that help regulate ion uptake and cell growth. When a root encounters a zone of higher electrical activity, it responds. Studies have shown that weak electric fields can increase the permeability of cell membranes, allowing nutrients to flow more freely into the plant. The effect is subtle, measured in millivolts and microamps, but over a growing season, those small advantages compound. The copper-zinc earth battery creates exactly this kind of environment. As the zinc slowly corrodes, it releases zinc ions into the surrounding soil. These ions are themselves a micronutrient, essential for enzyme function and chlorophyll production. The copper acts as a terminal, drawing electrons through the soil and creating a gradient that roots can sense. The electrical field does not replace nutrients. It enhances the plant's ability to access them, turning the soil into a more efficient delivery system. There is another factor at play, one that modern science is only beginning to understand. The microbial community in healthy soil is vast and interconnected. Fungi, bacteria, and archaea form networks that exchange nutrients and information across meters of ground. These organisms are themselves electrically active. Some bacteria generate their own currents as part of their metabolism. When you introduce a galvanic cell into this system, you are not just affecting the plant. You are influencing the entire underground ecosystem. Early research suggests that weak electrical fields can stimulate beneficial microbial activity, increasing the breakdown of organic matter and the availability of nutrients. The fertilizer industry rose to dominance in the 20th century on a simple promise: buy this bag, spread it on your field, and watch your yields climb. The Haber-Bosch process made synthetic nitrogen cheap and abundant. Potash mines supplied potassium by the trainload. Phosphate rock was crushed and processed into granules that dissolved with the first rain. The system was efficient, scalable, and most importantly, repeatable. Every season, farmers returned to the store for another purchase. The business model depended on consumption, on inputs that had to be renewed year after year. A technology that worked once and kept working forever did not fit this model. The earth battery required no refills. Zinc corrodes slowly, losing perhaps a few grams per year in a garden-scale installation. A single pair of electrodes, properly sized, could generate a current for a decade or more before needing replacement. The cost was negligible, a few dollars for materials that would outlast most garden tools. There was no profit margin in permanence, no shareholder value in a solution that did not require a subscription. By the mid-20th century, the earth battery had faded from agricultural conversation. Textbooks focused on chemical inputs and mechanical cultivation. Extension agents promoted the latest blends from the fertilizer companies. The old experiments with buried metals were dismissed as folklore, lumped in with dowsing rods and moon planting. The few researchers who continued to study bioelectricity found themselves marginalized, their papers rejected from mainstream journals, their funding requests denied. The science was not disproven. It was simply ignored. But the idea never quite died. In permaculture circles and organic homesteads, whispers of electroculture persisted. Gardeners experimented with copper pipes and galvanized nails, burying them near tomatoes and squash, swearing by the results even when they could not explain the mechanism. The internet brought these scattered practitioners together. Forums filled with photographs of oversized vegetables and testimonies of pest-free seasons. The evidence was anecdotal, but it was accumulating. In recent years, formal research has begun to catch up. A study published in the journal Bioelectrochemistry in 2020 examined the effect of weak electric fields on seed germination. The results showed a 20 to 30% increase in germination rates for wheat and barley exposed to fields similar to those generated by an earth battery. The researchers proposed that the electrical stimulus enhanced water uptake and activated metabolic pathways involved in early growth. Another study conducted at a university in Japan found that tomato plants grown in soil with buried electrodes produced fruit with higher sugar content and greater antioxidant levels. The electrical treatment seemed to trigger stress responses in the plant, but in a controlled way that led to improved quality rather than damage. The practical application of this science is surprisingly simple. To build an earth battery for your garden, you need two things: a piece of copper and a piece of zinc. Copper pipe, readily available at any hardware store, works well. For zinc, galvanized nails or a zinc rod will do the job. The key is to bury them in moist soil, separated by a distance of at least 30 centimeters. The soil between them acts as the electrolyte. If your ground is dry or sandy, the effect will be weaker. Clay and loam, rich in moisture and minerals, conduct better. Drive the copper into the ground near the root zone of your plants. Bury the zinc on the opposite side of the bed at a similar depth. Some gardeners connect the two metals with a wire above ground, completing the circuit and allowing electrons to flow more freely. Others leave them unconnected, relying on the soil itself to carry the current. Both methods have their advocates. The connected version creates a stronger field, but it may accelerate the corrosion of the zinc. The unconnected version is gentler, producing a subtler effect over a longer period. Orientation matters. Some electroculture enthusiasts align their electrodes with the Earth's magnetic field, placing the copper to the south and the zinc to the north. The theory is that this alignment harmonizes the galvanic current with the planet's natural electromagnetic flow. The science behind this claim is less established, but the practice costs nothing and may offer additional benefits. A cheap compass is all you need to get the orientation right. The results will not appear overnight. Unlike a dose of synthetic fertilizer, which floods the soil with immediately available nutrients, the earth battery works slowly. Over weeks and months, the electrical environment around your plants shifts. Roots grow denser and deeper. Leaves take on a darker green, a sign of increased chlorophyll production. Pest pressure often decreases, possibly because healthier plants produce more of the chemical compounds that deter insects. By the end of the first season, many gardeners report yields that rival or exceed their best chemically fed harvests. A retired engineer in Ohio installed copper and zinc electrodes in his raised beds 3 years ago. He keeps meticulous records, photographing his tomatoes at the same stage each summer. His data shows a 35% increase in fruit weight since he started the experiment. More striking is what he does not see anymore. The blossom end rot that plagued his plants for years has vanished. He attributes this to improved calcium uptake, a nutrient movement that depends on the electrical gradient across root cell membranes. In a community garden in Oregon, a group of urban farmers tested the earth battery against a control plot over 2 growing seasons. The treated beds received no fertilizer beyond a layer of compost at planting. The control beds got the standard organic regimen, fish emulsion and kelp meal applied every few weeks. At harvest, the earth battery beds matched the control in total yield, but the cost difference was dramatic. The fertilized plots required over $200 in inputs. The electroculture plots cost less than $15 to set up and nothing to maintain. Not every experiment succeeds. Soil type, moisture levels, and electrode placement all influence the outcome. Gardeners in arid climates report weaker effects, likely because dry soil conducts poorly. Those with heavy clay sometimes see dramatic results, the dense, mineral-rich ground acting as an ideal electrolyte. The learning curve is real, but the materials are cheap enough that failure costs almost nothing. A few nails and a length of pipe are a small price for the chance to opt out of the fertilizer treadmill. The deeper promise of the earth battery is not just about saving money or growing bigger vegetables. It is about shifting the relationship between the gardener and the soil. Chemical fertilizers treat the ground as a passive medium, a container to be filled with purchased inputs. The earth battery treats it as a living system, one that already possesses the energy and nutrients plants need. The role of the gardener becomes not to supply what is missing, but to unlock what is already there. Today, synthetic fertilizer production consumes nearly 2% of global energy and contributes significantly to greenhouse gas emissions. The runoff from over-fertilized fields poisons waterways and creates dead zones in coastal oceans. The industrial model of agriculture is reaching its limits, economically and ecologically. Meanwhile, a technology discovered almost 2 centuries ago sits waiting in the soil, ready to be rediscovered by anyone willing to bury two pieces of metal and trust the earth to do the rest. The companies that sell you fertilizer every spring have no interest in a solution that lasts for years. The academics who depend on grant funding have little incentive to study a method that cannot be patented or sold. The story of the Earth battery is not a conspiracy. It is simpler than that. It is the story of what happens when profit and permanence collide. The profitable option wins, not because it works better, but because it keeps you coming back. Your soil is already electric. The question is whether you will let it work for you or keep paying for what the ground can give you for free. Two metals buried once could change everything you believe about what your garden needs. The only cost is the willingness to try. What would you grow if the earth itself became your partner?